So session 10, moving right along. There's only 23 more. Then we've got the holidays coming up, so we'll have to figure out when everything falls. Like one in Messiah, we're going to miss a 24th is a Friday, 31st is a Friday. But anyway, and I hate missing. Like Sunday morning, I have to go to this Christmas concert that my granddaughter's doing, and I'd rather cut my wrists, but I missed her birthday because her birthday party was during one in Messiah, so I missed it. So I was kind of in the doghouse, so I got to go to the concert. I heard that this morning. We're going to the concert. You're going to the concert. And I said, okay, all right. I don't like kid events. But anyway. But at least she's 13, so the music isn't as bad as when they're 6. No, she's 13. Yeah, she plays viola, and she's actually very good. But and she's having surgery on both of her feet just before Christmas, so I never saw anything like that. She was born with an extra bone, an extra tarsal bone in each foot. And so her feet are kind of like flat and I don't know what the term would be, but she has very unusual looking feet. And so this orthopod at Cleveland Clinic is going to take out these extra bones, and after a month everything's supposed to correct itself. But so I got to go to the concert. Anyway, so session 10. So last time we ended up with Joseph at Potiphar's house, and everything in Potiphar's house is being blessed and thriving. And then Mrs. Potiphar, I call her that since we don't know what her name is. So Mrs. Potiphar wants to seduce him, wants to sleep with him. He rejects that, says, how could I do such a thing? And so she's got his cloak because he runs out the door. She's got the cloak. So, she calls Potiphar at the office and says, you better come home right away. And Potiphar had given him complete control over everything in the house. And so now he's thrown in prison. And I think we left off with, unlike where Bill's doing prison ministry now, I'm sure this was not a very even clean place. This was probably some kind of hole or some kind of dungeon. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on each of the, like I said, we can't read all the scripture, but he's in prison with 2 other guys. We go to chapter 40. He's in with 2 people who work in Pharaoh's court, a butler and a baker. And like he had dreams where his brothers got mad at him, each of these guys has a dream. And he interprets the dream, and the dreams come true. So if somebody wants to start reading it, somebody start reading at beginning of 40.
Captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them.
Yeah, okay, let's pause there. So, two guys in prison. The butler or cupbearer, whatever your translation says. A cupbearer was really important to a king because they kind of checked out the food and drink to make sure there wasn't poison in it. So I don't know if somebody used a long-acting poison. I don't know how long they waited after the guy ate the stuff. But if they used arsenic, it would take forever. If they used cyanide, it would be immediate. But the cupbearer, Nehemiah was cupbearer to the king, and so his cupbearer and this baker, they have these dreams. This goes back to, of course, many years later, how Daniel is going to have the dreams. And, after 586 BC, so it was long after this. But, he interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream without Nebuchadnezzar even telling the dream. He tells him what you dreamed and this is what it means, which was pretty awesome. So here you got this weird thing where the one guy's going to be, lifted up in 3 days and back to his job and everything's going to be cool. And the other guy's going to be executed and hung on a tree. So, of course, these things happened. And, when he talks to the cupbearer, Joseph says, when you get back into the court, remember me. Tell Pharaoh to get me out of this horrible place because I did you this really big favor. I told you this really big interpretation of your dream. So tell Pharaoh to get me out of here. And he gets his job back. He's at this big party for Pharaoh's birthday. And he didn't remember Joseph. So poor Joseph's still in the hole. And as I think we mentioned last time, when Joseph gets in the prison, everything in the prison, they put him in charge of the prison because everything's going well in the prison. So, so the dreams. But then the big thing is Pharaoh has dreams. Pharaoh has a dream, actually 2 dreams. And this is what is going to turn the whole tide of this. He's going to get Joseph out of jail and is going to end up bringing the family into Egypt, Jacob's family. Depending how you count it, 66 people, 70 people go from Canaan into Egypt because of a famine that's going to come. And everything pivots on this dream. I'm just going to read it real quick so you can hear it good on the video because it would be less editing for me to do. Where's Jordan? Nobody laughs at my jokes anymore. Is he coming tomorrow night? Okay. So 41. Then it came to pass at the end of 2 full years. So this guy gets out 2 years ago. Joseph's still in the hole, still in the prison. 2 more years. That Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he stood by the river. Suddenly there came out of the river 7 cows, fine looking and fat, and they fed in the meadow. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ugly and gaunt, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. And the ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 fine-looking and fat cows. So Pharaoh awoke. He slept and dreamed a second time, and suddenly 7 heads of grain came up on one stalk, plump and good. Then behold, 7 thin heads, blighted by the east wind, sprang up after them. and the 7 thin heads devoured the 7 plump and full heads. So Pharaoh awoke, and indeed it was a dream. Now it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret Pharaoh's dream. Then the chief butler spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I remember my faults this day, when Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker, the late chief baker, we both had a dream in one night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Now there was a young Hebrew man with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream, and it came to pass just as he interpreted it for us, so it happened. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. So now, finally, this guy remembers Joseph and tells Pharaoh. Now he's talking to Pharaoh, who you have to keep in mind at this time is the most powerful man in the world. This is the height of the Egyptian empire. And Pharaoh was thought to be a god. He was descended from the sun god. So there was a cult of worshiping Pharaoh. So this isn't just some, some kind of 2-bit official somewhere. This is like the most powerful man in the whole world. He's like the Caesar Augustus of his time. And so these guys, the butler / cupbearer finally tells Pharaoh about this guy because the magicians can't interpret the dreams. Now we're going to see later that these magicians have some power. They can turn water into blood. They can turn a staff into a snake. There is some power that comes from the demonic that can mimic a miracle. And, we know from the book of Revelation, the Antichrist is going to be able to do this kind of thing. He's going to be able to call down fire from heaven. He's going to be able to do things that are going to amaze people. So, and he's getting ready to do that right now. Even as we speak, he's on the horizon. But that's another lesson. Where's Jordan? Oh. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. And he shaved and changed his clothing and came to Pharaoh. I mean, you couldn't go seeing Pharaoh being a smelly mess with disgusting clothes. You were probably flopping around in the mud. So he shaves, changes his clothes. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that you can interpret and understand dreams. So Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Okay, so again, Joseph being an upright, moral young man says, it's God that does it. It's not me that does it. And we have to keep that in mind with everything we do. I mean, I'm sure some of you have been involved in healing ministries, and, you get a healing, and somebody says, when Joe over there prayed over the guy, Joe got him healed. Joe got to be. But you have to remember, it's, of course, God who does the miracle through the person. But, Joseph points out, it's not me that's interpreting the dream, God is telling me what the dream means, because it's going to be important. And, prophecies are always used for God's purposes. Prophecies are, of course, always used. Whether they're, and dreams are a big one. I mean, communication from either him, talk about him for hours, but, Daniel, of course, is well known. Joseph, Mary's husband, angel tells him things in a dream. Joseph never says anything in the scriptures, but, he dreams about this angel who tells him, we find out he's from the house of David, and we find out, he's got to protect the child. Don't be afraid to take Mary. And then later on, he's going to have a dream about take the child and his mother and go to Egypt. So there's a lot of communication in a dream. So here, Joseph understands this, and the magicians can't. So Pharaoh tells him the dream. Let's go down to 25. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do, meaning God. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. The dreams are one. And the 7 thin, ugly cows which came out after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty heads blighted by the east wind are 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Indeed, 7 years of great plenty will come throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them 7 years of famine will arise. All the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and famine will deplete the land. So the plenty will not be known in the land because of the famine following, for it will be very severe. So what he's saying is there's going to be 7 good years, there's going to be 7 bad years. So God's telling you what he's going to do. Much later on, God is going to tell Isaiah, my favorite major prophet, he's going to tell Isaiah, I don't do anything without telling you first. Now, the Bible is the only holy book, well, it's the only holy book, but it's the only book of any religion that has prophecy in it. The only book. The Quran has no prophecy. The Hindu writings, Buddhist writings, whatever you want to name, no prophecy in it. The Bible's the only book that has prophecy. And it's written over 2,500 years, and the prophecies are internally consistent. There's little, minor discrepancies here and there, which my favorite always is, Matthew talks about the Sermon on the Mount, and Luke calls it the Sermon on the Plain. And people say, oh, okay, so what is it? So they're disagreeing. Say, well, if you go to the place, it's up on a high area overlooking the Sea of Galilee. Then there's kind of a gentle slope that you can barely tell as you're walking that ends up down at the sea. So depending where you're sitting, it can be a mountain or it can be a plain. But anyway, so that's not really even a discrepancy, but it's internally consistent with prophecy. And it's the only book that has prophecy. So Joseph comes up with a solution. And this is what blows Pharaoh away. Just, okay, here's the deal. Save food while there's lots of food. Then when there's no food, you'll have food. Okay? Now, keep in mind, of course, there's no refrigeration, of course. You can't, pack away beef and fish and sour cream and milk. But you can put non-perishable stuff away for 7 years, so that in the next 7 years you're going to have food. And Pharaoh loves this. And if we go, let Pharaoh select a discerning wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years, gather them, all the food of the good years that are coming, and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and keep food in cities. Then that the food shall be a reserve in the land for the 7 years of famine, so that nobody will perish during the famine. Great solution. So Pharaoh says, this is awesome. This guy Joseph, he's awesome. So this is now the third person who says, wow, Joseph's got something about him. He organized Potiphar's house, he organized the prison. Now he's going to organize Egypt. And he's basically going to be, and look at verse 38. Pharaoh said to his servant, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Now here's a pagan emperor, king, who is thought by his subjects to be a god. So you have to worship the Pharaoh. because he's descended from the sun god, who says the Spirit of God is on this young man. So this is, kind of a Holy Spirit moment with the true God intervening in this whole situation. And even this pagan guy who is, quote, a deity, says this young man has the Spirit of God in him. And the Hebrew there is the Spirit of God, the God of Israel, not some Egyptian god, not the sun god. And, a lot of these emperors, well, even in almost our time, a little before most of our times, the emperor of Japan was worshipped as a god. And, one of the things he had to do after the war as part of the surrender was he had to tell the people he wasn't a god. Now, I can laugh at that and say, no kidding. But to them, it was like a big deal. Because here's a god saying, I'm not really a god, so, stop all the emperor worship. And, of course, when you go to the 7 cities in the book of Revelation were the center of what was called the Caesar cult. Because the Caesars, the emperors, were gods. They demanded worship. And so in these cities of the Revelation, boy, it was a big thing to worship the Caesar, whoever he was at the time. And, of course, in Rome, too. But so once a year, the Romans were very tolerant about what kind of gods you had and stuff. But once a year, you had to go throw a pinch of incense into a fire and say, Caesar is Lord. And it had to be witnessed. So, of course, the Jews didn't do it and the Christians didn't do it. So there was trouble. The Jews all got expelled, and, of course, the Christians were persecuted. And, yeah, fed to hungry lions, hungry deer. Oh, no, deer don't eat people. So put a fifth away in the storage and then use it during the famine. And the polytheistic emperor is amazed by this. And he makes Joseph the governor of Egypt. He's second in command only to the Pharaoh. And he's not even an Egyptian. It says, see, I have set you, in verse 41, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh took his signet ring, which is a sign of authority. That's what they used to sign documents. Pharaoh gives it to Joseph, his signet ring. So he's authority over the whole land. Clothed him in garments of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck. And he rode in a second chariot behind the Pharaoh, and people yelled, bow the knee as they went by. So everybody had to bow as Pharaoh and Joseph went by. So how cool is that? And I love verse 44. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. So in other words, Joseph has control over the whole land. You can't even move a hand or a foot without checking with Joseph. That's how much power he had. So royal clothes, a signet ring, nobody can move. And, of course, they have to give him an Egyptian name. I mean, you can't have an Egyptian governor being named Yosef. And so, sorry, Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah, which I still call him Joseph. But you're not allowed to call him Joe until maybe when you get to heaven you're allowed to call him Joe. Yes. 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 That's right. You know what I think is interesting, too, in that thing is the 3 boys that are thrown into the furnace are known by their Babylonian names. But Daniel, I think it's only mentioned a couple of times what his Babylonian name was. But anyway. I don't remember if it was him, but I remember one of those black comedians cracked. I still remember it. I was in high school. It was on Laugh-In or some show like that. He was doing this skit, and he said, well, if you white people don't like it here, you can all go back to England. That still cracks me up after 50-some years. But anyway, and he gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. So he gets an Egyptian name, he gets an Egyptian wife, and he goes around the land and he builds granaries and warehouses. Now, I work with an organization that we adopted this. It's called the Joseph Project because we ship stuff to Israel and it's given to poor people, especially in the north, that came from the former Soviet Union and are much poorer than the rest of the people. So we've built a bunch of warehouses, little warehouses in I can't remember how many different towns, and all the stuff is collected there and passed out. So we call that the Joseph Project after this. So, needless to say, the dreams come true. There's 7 years of plenty. They store tons of food in each of these warehouses, and he puts the warehouses by the cities so that when the famine comes, people can come out there and get food. And Pharaoh's thing is, whenever something comes up, Pharaoh's line is, go to Joseph. He's running all of this. So Pharaoh doesn't want to hear about all the stuff. Go to Joseph. He's in charge of all of this. So how cool is that? So our little guy who got, thrown into the pit, sold as a slave, did all this stuff, now he's made the big time. He's got a cool chariot. Gets to ride behind Pharaoh. It doesn't tell us what Potiphar thought about all this, but that'd be an interesting character study, or Mrs. Potiphar for that matter. Where's Jordan? So, because this famine was so severe, it tells us down toward the end of 41 and 56, the famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, and the famine became severe in the land of Egypt. So all countries came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine was severe in all the lands. So they've got the food, everybody else has got the famine. Now the famine also affects the land of Canaan. Egypt's got grain stored. I read where there was some historical evidence that this in fact happened, that there was some problem with the Nile, that the water levels went down, and so the fields weren't as fertile, and there was actually a long time of famine. So Jacob now is still in the land of Canaan, and they've got no food. And so he tells his sons to go to Egypt because there's food there. I mean, the word gets around. He goes on Google and types in, where is there food? And thinks, Egypt. So he says to these guys, you guys get up off your lazy butts, get on some donkeys and go to Egypt. And that's what they, in fact, did. And Joseph, of course, has no way to know that they're coming. We see at the beginning of 42, Jacob saw there was grain in Egypt. And he said to his sons, why do you look at one another? They're just like sitting around going, what do we do? What are we going to do? Go down and buy some for us that we may live and not die. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall them. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed to Egypt. So he sends 10 of the boys to Egypt to buy grain, keeps Benjamin behind. Remember, Benjamin is the youngest one. He's Benjamin's son in my right hand. So he figures if some calamity happens and these boys get killed, at least he's still got little Benjamin. Now, the older boys like Reuben and Simeon and Judah and Levi, they're adults now, of course. They have wives, they have children. I mean, a lot of time has gone by. Because when this whole family moves to Egypt, there's about 70 people. And one thing that's going to happen in Egypt is a family goes in and a nation comes out. 70 people or so go in, 600,000 and some men, plus women, plus children, come out. So the nation is formed, grows in Egypt, which God calls the iron furnace for a variety of reasons, which we're not going to get into till later in Deuteronomy. So here's an interesting thing that happens in verse 6. Now Joseph was governor over all the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Remember, that was Joseph's first dream. All the other 11 sheaves of grain are going to bow to the one in the center. And they said, "Oh, you think we're going to bow down to you? You think we're going to serve us?" And the prophetic power of this is that Jesus, Yeshua, as an Israelite, as a brother of the Israelites, who's rejected, sold, let's have these Gentiles get rid of him. We don't want to deal with this. We'll just have these Romans take care of it. We'll let the Ishmaelites take it. We'll let the Gentiles take care of them. All these disgusting people can get rid of this troublemaker for us. Same thing that the brothers did with Joseph, Jesus' brothers in the flesh did with him. And he's the one, Joseph is the one who's king, and he has the provisions. He's got the food. He's got the grain. The brothers don't. So at some point, and we're not talking about, physical provision, we're talking about spiritual provision. So at some point, the brothers are going to come, and they're going to bow down to Jesus like they bowed down to Joseph. That's coming in Israel. It's happening at an increasing level, but pretty soon it's going to blow up. Woo! Zechariah 12:10, and I hope I'm there when it happens. But they're going to finally, of course, they don't know who he is yet, just like the Israelites of today don't really know who Jesus is. The people, his people of all these last two millennia, haven't recognized who he is. Just like these guys don't recognize Joseph. And why don't they recognize him? He's wearing Egyptian clothes. He's speaking Egyptian. He talks to them through an interpreter. He doesn't want to give himself away yet. We don't know what kind of Hebrew they would have spoken. But Joseph speaks Egyptian to them through an interpreter. He's dressed like one of them. In other words, when Jewish people look today at what we do, they see Jesus as a Gentile. Even though they know he was not a Gentile, they look at him as, the Gentiles made him a god. So they look at him as a Gentile god. He might have been a nice guy. He wasn't really much of anything. But the Gentiles made him a god. So they don't recognize him because they see him dressed. They don't recognize Jesus partly because they see him dressed as a foreigner. They don't see that he's one of them. Many, 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 many Jews that you talk to who have come to Jesus say they They've never read the Old Testament because they figured it was a Gentile book. And when they start to read the Gospels, especially Matthew, they realize this is a Jewish book. In the New Testament, there's a bunch of Jewish books put together. And when they read Matthew, they understand the genealogy of Jesus, and that really impacts them because they see Jesus in a different way. They see him in a different, I don't want to call it a disguise, but they don't see him as he really is. Like we see him as he really is. Well, not see him, but you know what I mean. We know who he really is. So here, the brothers fulfill the dream that Joseph had. They all bow down to him with their faces to the ground. And eventually, the Israelites are going to bow to Jesus. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Now, we're not going to go through all of this. There's like a lot of cultural stuff in the context of all this. Joseph doesn't want to give himself away. He's not really angry at them, but he's also not, hey guys, it's me. Yeah. Hey, remember me? The guy you threw in the hole? Where's Judah? Get him over here. I'm the second most powerful guy in Egypt, so now you guys are going to face the music, so to speak. But what he does is he covers his emotions with being terse. You know, he kind of like covers up his real emotions by acting like a tough guy. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I think, I think men in particular, I don't know if women do this or not, but I think men in particular, when you got like a real sensitive emotion, you don't want to sit someplace and have a real sensitive, get teary-eyed because you think, man, all these men are going to think I'm some kind of sissy. So you kind of like, well, I'm just going to tough this out, and I'm going to, So I think that's what he was doing. But one way or another, he puts them in prison for a while. And he tells them, I'm going to give you stuff and let you go back to your father, but I want you to come back and bring Benjamin. He asks them, is your father still alive? Yes. Where is he? He's back in the land. He's got little younger Benjamin with him. He says, well, I'm going to give you stuff. I'm going to keep one of you as a hostage, so I'm sure you're going to come back. And I want your father and the other brother to come back with you. So he really wants to see little Benjamin. They're full brothers, same mother, same father. So he gives them all kinds of provision. And he puts their money back in the sacks. So they go back to Canaan with all kind of supplies. And again, Jesus gives us unlimited provision. And the cost is zero. The cost is zero. Not only for the provision, but even for salvation, the cost is zero. So I always tell people, in all the classes I teach everywhere, if you don't think about the cross 20 times a day, you don't get what happened there. He was a good teacher and a good philosopher, and, it's too bad they killed him, but, wrong approach. Wrong approach. But here you have, he gives them bags of, unlimited supplies of grains, puts their money back in the thing, and sends them back. They find the money in with the grain, and they get kind of worried they're going to get in some kind of trouble. And they get convinced in their consciousness that all this is happening because they treated Joseph so badly. Down in 35, that happened, they emptied their sacks, and surprisingly, each man's bundle of money was in the sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. All these things are against me. But after Joseph hears about all this stuff, he gives them all the grains, doesn't take any food. But the famine is so severe they have to go back. And this time they take Benjamin. And, you know, it points out, and you really should read all this with your homework for your homework. It turns out that Joseph keeps his identity so secret that he speaks through an interpreter. So they really don't know that it's him. He knows them, they don't know him. So Jacob, of course, is worried that Simeon's being held as a hostage, and now he's going to take Benjamin, and then all the boys are going to be lost. All right, let's see what else I should read here. I mean, basically, the boys tell the father they have to go back because the famine is so bad, and they're going to take some of the stuff from the land, some of the spices and the nuts with them to give to Joseph. And so he agrees to do that and let Benjamin. And he says down in 43:14, and may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may release you and your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So these men took the presents and Benjamin, and they took double money in their hands and arose and went down to Egypt, and they stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of the house, take these men to my home and slaughter an animal and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon. Then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, it is because of the money which was returned in our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so that he may make a case against us, seize us, and take us as slaves with our donkeys. So now we're going to get it. They're taking us to Joseph's house, and now we're going to face the music. You know, when you look at the brothers representing Israelites, and you look at Joseph representing Messiah, he's a type of the Messiah. The next lesson, we're going to go over this huge list of all the ways Joseph prefigures Jesus. It'll be kind of a summary. But because he prefigures Messiah, if you see him in the place of Jesus, the brothers say, wow, imagine the Israelites saying, oh, he's really the Messiah. We had him executed. Now what's going to happen to us? You know, it's if you read that passage in Zechariah 12:10, it says they look on him whom they've pierced, and they mourn as you mourn for an only son. They realize he's Messiah. They're happy, but they mourn because they think, oh, for 2,000 years, we missed this. He was here. We mistreated him. We had him executed. Now he's back. He's coming back. He's here. But they're going to be treated with blessing and mercy and grace, not with vindictiveness, as Joseph's later going to say, what you meant for evil, God used for good. You know, if you were standing around in Jerusalem on Good Friday and you saw this horrible scene of this poor man on this cross and this brutality, and you'd have thought, oh man, that poor guy, he must have done something really horrible for the Romans to be doing this to him. And oh yeah, our leader said, you know, he isn't any good. He isn't. Oh yeah, well, you know, that's what he gets. But oh man, this is really brutal. This is really bad. you would think, well, this is a terrible thing that's happened, and then you'd go home. You would never think about the guy again, maybe. But that was the centerpiece of all of salvation history, the centerpiece of everything that's in all of these books of the whole Bible, not just Torah, but the whole Bible. The centerpiece is the cross. So people meant that for evil. We're going to get rid of this guy. We're going to murder him. We're going to have these Gentiles do it. And that was the act of salvation. So the brothers are a little bit worried as they're taken to Joseph's house. When they drew near to the steward of Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door and said, "Oh, sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food. But it happened when we came to the encampment, we opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in the mouth of the sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back. Hey, you didn't take our money here. We're going to leave the money back, so we don't want to get in any more trouble. And we have brought down other money in our hands to buy food." But he, the steward, says, "Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God, and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks." Then he brought Simeon out to them. So here's this other pagan Egyptian. It says, your God has given you this. And it's not for money. Forget about the money. The gospel's free. Forget about the money. Remember in the book of Acts, there was this guy, I can't remember which chapter it is. You probably know, Bill. This guy who was told the apostles that were there, "Hey, I'll pay you guys if you teach me how to do that stuff you guys do. Like, do healings and cast out demons and, do miracles like you guys do. Hey, I'll pay you." And Peter smacks him around verbally and says, "I hope your money perishes with you, you creep." You have to know the ancient languages to see that he said, "You creep." Oh, good. Got a good laugh. That's good. So here they are in the house. This guy tells them, your God is giving you treasure in your sacks. So the man brought him in, gave them water to wash their feet, fed their donkeys, made ready for all this food. When Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house and bowed down before him to the earth. Then he asked them about their well-being and said, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" They answered, "Your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. They're like bowing, and bowing. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Now his heart yearned for his brother, so Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went to his chamber and wept there. So Joseph got so overwhelmed seeing Benjamin in this whole situation that he had to cry, so he went to a private place to cry. Do you remember when Jesus cried about his brethren? In Luke's gospel, where he overlooks the city. He's coming down the Mount of Olives and he overlooks the city and says, "Oh, how many times I wanted to gather you like a hen gathers her chicks, but you were not willing. You didn't recognize the time of your visitation." And he wept. Weeps over the city. There's a little church, a little chapel on that spot on the Mount of Olives that's shaped like a teardrop because Jesus wept there. So he wept for the people in the city. Number one, because they missed the opportunity of salvation at that point. Number two, is he knew in 36 or 37 years that they were all going to be destroyed. So they both weep. So they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with them by themselves, because the Egyptians would not eat food with the Hebrews, for it is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked astonished at one another. Then he took servings to them from before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as theirs. So they drank and were merry. So here's all the brothers. Had him, wanted to kill him, sold him into slavery. Father thought he was dead. Now they're at this banquet where they're getting all this food and they're astonished. And Benjamin gets 5 times more food than the rest of them. I just thought that was cute. And so then, so he fills their sacks up with food again, and we're not going to go through all of this, but kind of sends a blessing to their father again, and we're going to leave it with that because they find their money and stuff again on the way home. So again, they got all kind of provision for nothing, for no cost, and he hasn't identified himself yet, but he's going to. He says in verse 24, "So it was when you went up to your servant, my father, that we told him the words of my Lord, and our father said, 'Go back and buy us a little food.' But we said, 'We cannot go down if our youngest brother is with us. Then we will go down, for we must not see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us.' So we fulfilled the conditions. We brought Benjamin back, and now we got this food again, and now we're going to go back, and the famine is still going on, of course, but now, when we start next time, we're going to go to the events that are going to lead Joseph to be revealed. And please read all that stuff for your homework. It could be tedious, but you have to read all that stuff for your homework. Not nearly as tedious as Leviticus. That's good, some laughs. All right.